Would socialism work in my country? Now, that is a very legitimate question that a lot of people find themselves asking themselves. And if you're asking yourself that question, that means you're actually genuinely thinking and contemplating stuff, and which is beautiful, especially if you're young and you're exploring and growing and testing yourself experientially, existentially, cognitively, all these things. It's just a truly wonderful thing to really explore things. And, if you're going through this question, I'm not going to toss out my answer to you right away. No, I'm actually going to endorse that progression, that little journey that you're on. And I'm going to introduce to you a few questions that, moved me when I was going through that phase and I think would be worthy for you to ask yourself and just take these thoughts, ideas, and questions for a walk. Just examine your society. Anyways, without further ado. So, the first example I want to draw up is if you just take the average citizen in your country or your community, if you want to start small, just in your community, the average citizen who maybe owns a home, their own property, and you put them at the end of their driveway. So the person has a gum in their mouth or a piece of trash, and there's no trash can in sight, and they're in a hurry. Do you think the average person would be more likely to take the piece of gum or the trash and toss it inside of their own driveway or on the sidewalk or the street? So, in their own private property or on the piece of public property? That is the first question. Another example is just people in general out in society. How do they treat public property? Do they generally litter a lot? Do you see a lot of people walking around the streets, and when they see litter on the street, do they generally pick it up, somebody else's litter, and put it in the trash can? Or just where between those two extreme parameters, where do you see the bulk of the average people in your society or in your community or country? Another thing, now, let's say you have a group of friends. There might be, whether you have two or three really close friends or you're a group of five or six or whatnot. Picture just you and your closest friends. You love each other, care for each other. Maybe you go way back. Let's say you guys all decided that you were going to own and share a car together. You're just going to try and figure out whenever anyone needs it, that person can just take the car and go do whatever they want, and then they bring it back. And so just figure, how would that work out? Would someone or some two people use the car more or less than others? Would some people strive to use it as much as they can, or would everybody respect that this belongs to all of us and we're all just going to need it when we need it? Just going to use it when we need it, I'm sorry. So, where on that line would you and your close friends fall? Be honest with yourselves and honest towards who you are in that respect and to who they are. Also, would all of you guys be likely to bring the car back with a full tank of gas and clean and nice and neat after each time? Or would some be more inclined to fill the tank up than others? And then there are expenditures, such as insurance, licensing fees, well, registration fees, and tires, maintenance, and everything. Would everyone be just as likely to chip in and to make sure that maintenance is properly done? Would some guys look at the tires and go, "Nah, we can drive another few thousand miles on these tires," while someone else would go, "No, these tires aren't good. We need to change them now." So would there be some conflict there? Now, what all of this is boiling down to is the idea called the tragedy of the commons. So basically, if you find that people in general are more likely to put trash or litter or a piece of gum on public property than onto their own property, and generally would rather be likely to maintain their own home than anything they have to share with others, And if you believe that not all of you guys as friends would be just as likely to take super good care of that car you're sharing, and then if you believe that people generally out in society or community would be more likely to throw litter somewhere than to pick up somebody else's litter and clean it. Also, another thing, um, in general, do people go out and protest much when they're not satisfied? And if they do they vandalize public property or any property when they go out and protest and mobilize themselves to vocalize their disagreements, if you will, or uh, well, sorry, brain fart. When they're unhappy about something, um, it totally slipped my tongue the word there. But yeah, so these questions. Now the opposite. I'm again honest here. The opposite to the tragedy of the commons would be the comedy of the commons. That people would be just so happy to share and humbled and honored to share things that they would have a tremendous amount of respect for it, and everybody would just be so pumped to really chip in. And to a large extent, when most of the time when I hear people try and argue for the comedy of the commons, they're just saying, well, we'd all be so happy to live in this beautiful perfect society that we'd be super ambitious to just all chip in and work super hard and be super diligent. And sadly, most of the times I don't see it happen. Now, there are of course various degrees to this. In some countries they're very diligent when it comes to public property. You see, the most beautiful example I found was when a group of Japanese fans were watching a sports team uh, of theirs, the Japanese team, play, and they all cleaned all the trash from the tribunals after, before they left. It was almost as if there was a sense of duty and something. So yeah, so look at that. Is there some of that in your country or in your community, a sense of duty like that? And then is it cultural, or is it because you already have laws that enforce it? So do you have heavy fines like they do in some places for littering, or and then if you would need heavy fines in your community to police and engineer how people would behave, how far do you need to go? Do you need to have it make it $1,000 fine, or do you need to pull a gun at somebody's head just for them to not throw trash on the street? And would that even work? How far? Where's the extent and the perimeter here? That's always a good question. Just to really start to get to know your community and your society. Where does people's everyday behavior fall on this spectrum? And and I'm talking people in general. I'm not talking the extremes of the super diligent ones. You can point to one or two of those and say, "Well, look at those. They're super diligent. That's why this is going to work." Or the extreme opposite and say, "Well, look at those. They're trashing everything, and that's why this is never going to work." Both of these are equally dishonest. Just look at people in general. Um, as as far as the tragedy of the commons versus the comedy of the commons goes. And quite frankly, and this is where I'm stating from how I see it, in most Western countries today, we're very much at the tragedy of the commons. And yeah, it's somewhat understandable as to why we're there, because in a lot of Western countries we've gotten used to this idea that if we're not satisfied with something, and we have some discontent, then all we got to do is just rally the troops and like organize and just go out there and yell and be loud and just be brutes and rioters and hooligans, and if we do enough of that, then eventually they'll give in and we'll get everything we want, and we'll get all these things our way. And sadly enough, we've been rewarded for that behavior. And the reason for why I say it's sad, it is because it comes at a cost to all of us. Because if we do riot and we do damage public property a lot, and yeah, that is going to come out of a state person. Yeah, you might say, well, it's okay because we're just gonna tax the rich guy for it. Well, yeah, you tax all these guys who are richer than you more, and then of course some of them are either gonna offshore their assets or they're gonna move or leave or whatnot, or eventually, it's going to shrink their assets and it's going to shrink your employment opportunities because we're all interconnected. Attacking just one person is eventually at some point doing that is going to come back to you. And that's that ideology aside. So, and this is what many modern day socialists either don't understand this or want to overlook it because we can just print money and go into debt. But the early day socialists, they knew this. That they actually understood that we either succeed as a whole or we do not, and that's why they were very different in some ways than modern day socialists, but not in every way. They talked differently. They were more socially conservative. And this is something when I bring up socially conservative socialists to people, a lot of them go, "Wait, what?" It's precisely this. They had a different take on the idea of sustainability than many socialists do today, and in many ways because they weren't quite as used to this idea of fiat currency models on steroid just going rampant. And that's that's monetary policy, and that's um, financial engineering. So if you're interested in that, yeah, look into that aspect as well. But this is merely just looking at this basic behavioral aspect. So we've covered that. So where do you guys score as a society in in regards to the tragedy of the commons versus the comedy of the commons? You as a society, you as a person, you with your friends, or as just the small community. Just look at just explore that, and you make up your mind. I'm not to tell. The second example that I want to bring up, or the second question or set of questions, if you will, is in regards to wealth. Is wealth finite or infinite? And the first question then we have to ask, so what is wealth? Okay, so let's say I have my cup here made out of, various things, and my coffee in it. Okay, so material things. Yeah, those are valuable to me. I like my coffee. I'm willing to pay for my coffee to have that every day, and I'm willing to pay for the cups that I need to drink my coffee, obviously. Or I might need to use paper cups and then chuck them every day, and I'll go through a whole bunch of that. So those are material values. But then, and this is somewhat where this becomes a murky area, which is where it's very easy to be manipulative about value and completely throw the whole debate and conversation awry, if you will. And that's where it comes to when it comes to intellectual property. So not just creative works like a song you write, or a piece of literature, or me creating this video by talking these ideas out to you, which may or may not be valuable to you, and I'm fully aware of that. But it's also innovation, inventions, technology. So you see, let's just look at energy. So we've had throughout, especially throughout the agricultural and hunter-gatherer era, and pretty much all of evolution, we've had the sun as our predominant source of energy. So it shines a light on to the entire globe for a certain amount of time, all throughout the year, and we get harvest of grass and plants and seeds, and then some animals eat those plants, and then other animals eat those animals, etc., etc. The whole cycle of life. And of course, then we got on to inventing fire so we can keep warm in the winter and we can live in trickier areas, and burn various stuff, be it, dry soil or wood or what have you. All these things, you guys know all these things, but I'm just like tracing this for context. I'm not trying to insult you guys' intelligence. So, yeah, at some point we got to a point where we're using whale blubber as fuel. And then we went into the petroleum era. Now, the petroleum era is slightly different in nature. And just as much as mining for gold and silver and iron ore and all these, minerals, because we're digging into the ground for sources of energy and material goods that, hold it, the sun created and used to shine on, and this then got covered. So this is using, as some would put it, this is using the energy of sun cycles or years in the past. So digging up the energy, wealth, and resources that were created by years of time spent in the past, back when we as human beings were not harvesting these resources. So we're digging for resources that are limited because they were created by nature over time before we were making use of the planet the way we are today. And yes, those are quite a bit finite. There's a limit to how much petroleum and gold and silver and all these things the world has managed to create before we started digging throughout every place to pick that stuff up. And yeah, when we picked it all up, what are we going to do? Wait another million years until the world has regenerated itself enough time to create more petroleum? No, of course, when we're out, we're pretty much out. And this is what we're realizing today. We're gradually running a little lower on petroleum supplies and energy supplies of various sorts, and alternative energy is coming in. And what's that? Now that's technology, innovation. Solar panels. We didn't really have those 100 years ago. We were using the sun mostly for harvesting our food, etc., among other things, but we weren't really taking the rays of the sun and turning them into electricity, which we can now. And if electricity has a value, then that technology to create the electricity must have some value, especially if at some point there's no oil left, and then you have less competition to create electricity. For instance, you're even either going to have to resort to that, or wind turbines, or water turbines, or big hydropower plants, and you're always going to have all these different options. But when you start running low on one option, it's eventually going to bring value of some of the other options a little bit up. So it's going to affect this, and technologies that can be made sustainable at some point, be it that we can make them sustainable today or that they become sustainable in the future because we run out of one or more of the other options, then surely those technologies, that intellectual property, has some value. So if we take that into account on top of the material property, then we see that, and even finding new ways to make use of that material property that is more valuable or makes it useful for more different things or makes us able to do more with less of it, that is increased value. And if you believe that that bigger picture that I painted for you somewhat makes sense, then you would surely have to argue that value isn't finite. Material goods that can be harvested might be finite, but the utility is not. And that's one of the main things that makes value not really finite, and wealth. And then there's another question that comes into it. So the theory of value. So there's one thing that socialism really builds on is the labor theory of value. So you just calculate how much each and every working person needs to live a decent life, and those wages, that's basic across the board, regardless of what they do. It's just that's that's what they need to live. So whatever they do, you need to pay them that. And that idea is competing with what we call subjective value theory. This is going a bit more into the economics, but you're a smart bunch. Yeah, even if you haven't had any econ, you're going to get these two concepts. So if we just look at the labor theory of value, it means that no matter what you have a person do, they're going to be paid the same. So the output is going to have the same price tag, the same label, versus subjective value theory. So basically, if rather than me sitting here talking, let's just imagine I'm sitting here talking and I'm on payroll, and none of you guys find this, important at all. Think I'm wasting your time. This, ends up being no value to anyone. Then I will still be paid, even though nobody wants what I am producing right now. I will still be paid to live for doing this. And that's the problem you run into with the subjective value theory. Because what if everyone else in my country did stuff like this that no one found valuable, because this is the work we wanted. This is what I want to do. I'm entitled to do this. I deserve to get to do this. You should just pay me for that because that is my right. What if we all just behaved like that? All of us. And well, who's gonna collect our trash? Who's gonna bring food to the store? Who's gonna do everything else that needs to be done to keep a society rolling? And yeah, this, I get it. It's an ugly game. I've had to do, shitty jobs on the bottom, and better jobs, and slightly better jobs than that, and everything in between. I get this game, and I get that it's tough, and I get that it doesn't always feel fair. And you have to really strive and work your ass off to get to do anything you're remotely interested in. Even in a good society, you have to really strive your ass off to get to do something that's remotely interesting. Why? Because there are more jobs for trash collectors, or construction workers, or industrial workers, etc. Usually more jobs for those, and more jobs for various lower skilled work than there are CEO jobs, or jobs as big celebrities, or jobs as presidents, or whatever. So yeah, if it's worth having, it's there's going to be a lot of competition for it, and it's going to be very hard to get. But it should be like that, in a sense. Well, that's how I feel. It should be at least not too easy to at least get a job with big responsibilities, like running a country. I wish that was harder to run for office. I wish that was a lot harder, because then maybe we'd get even better people doing it, right? Anyways, so that's this idea with competition versus not, and then the labor theory of value versus subjective value theory. If we are good as consumers now, another thing, well, let me just do this. If we're clever as consumers, and we're all good at recognizing value, we'll make the things that are really, really good. Most of us will make things that are really, really good more valuable, and more people, competent people, will go strive to do that and do that really well. And we'll get a market that's producing something really, really good and healthy that most of us find to be good and healthy, that serves the values of more of us rather than fewer of us. But the thing is, we're not always good consumers either, are we? We all have our strengths and weaknesses and our flaws, and often at times, yeah, we go for the quick fixes. But that doesn't just happen on the market. It's not just on the market where it's almost as if we value a new iPhone every 6 months more than we value a new technology to screen for cancer. If we were all if we were all trying to buy that new machine that's going to screen for cancer in 3 months, and we were willing to pay a whole bunch for it, then maybe we would get that machine faster. No. What is the signal that we send? We all want free healthcare. So we say it should cost zero, but somebody else is going to pay for it. See, this is a trick with socialism. So how are you going to solve that? If we all say, well, this is a right, we should get it for free. How do you still make it lucrative enough to keep people incentivized enough so you're getting new medical technology as fast as you're getting the new iPhone? How do you solve it? This is observable. It's and it's pretty empirical. So you're going to say, well, that's not factual. Well, people are going to challenge you on that. So you're much better off saying, okay, so maybe this is a fact. And if it is a fact, how would we solve it? How am I going to solve it? The more questions you ask yourself, you're surely going to end up with a more deeper, better sculpted idea. And yeah, this thing is, like I said, we all have flaws. So maybe your friend is better at taking care of things than you are. And it's so weird. It almost it's gonna sound sinister, and a lot of people are gonna give me a lot of flack for this, but still, and this appeals to myself as much as anyone. It's so funny that if you have a dog and the dog runs around and tears your house apart while you're not there, while you're out for 2 hours doing grocery shopping, you come home and the dog's just trashed your entire apartment. Are you gonna give the dog a treat? How is the dog gonna respond if you give it a treat? Let me tell you, overwhelming odds. You go out the next time to buy groceries, dog is gonna do the same thing, and then it's gonna sit there, very excited when you come, waiting, because it knows it's gonna get treat. I got treats the last time. I'm gonna get treats again. Does that mean all of us human beings are dogs? No, of course not. But when it comes down to responding to incentives, we're not all that different in our basis nature. We're not all that different. And you know what? It should be humbling to just accept and appreciate that. We should be able to appreciate ourselves, laugh at ourselves, make fun of ourselves, and enjoy ourselves in that. So yeah, no, it's the same. So look at it. You reward the dog. Again, people riding in the streets, they're angry. Yeah, maybe they're angry for very valid reasons. And you feel empathy because there are valid reasons and these people are hurting. But you can't reward that behavior, can you? Because if you reward that behavior, yeah, some of them, give them all they want. Some of them are going to be very happy. They're going to go out and do great things. We don't know how many. So if you see a group of people riding, you have a sense of that in your community, ask yourself, if I gave all these people everything they wanted today, how many of them would be likely to say thank you, be satisfied, and go on their way and do a decent life after that? And how many would take that, woohoo, squander it, and then again, not too long later, it's not enough. I'm not happy. I'm going to go out and ride again. And then they do that, and they get it rewarded again. And nothing's ever good enough. Nothing's ever enough. They squander it all away, and then again, angry, hurt, riot. How big a percentage do you reckon out of your society or community would keep repeating that behavior? And also, this is another thing, and it's very sensitive, but I don't care. I'm going to go there. Addiction. And it has many forms. It's not just substances, drugs, or alcohol or anything. No, you can be addicted to different foods. You can be addicted to leisure, entertainment. You can be addicted to money. Even if you're not spending it, just having it, knowing that you have it. I don't know. I don't get it. But some people seem to really, really enjoy having a big bank account, even though they don't seem to be doing much with it. And yeah, all these various things. So to just put all of it under one umbrella, I really just, and this is probably generalizing it. So if you have issues with it, challenge me on it in the comment section. But I put all of this under one umbrella: lifestyle addiction. You have a certain lifestyle that incorporates a certain degree of addictive behavioral and mentality traits to it. Whether it is that you're addicted to going out partying or addicted to going on vacations, in faraway countries or whatnot. And a lot of us do have addictions to some degree, but to which degree do they govern our lives? Are we able to be functional and produce enough wealth for others to recoup enough from them, be rewarded enough for that to cover our lifestyle, whatever it is? And yeah, again, going back to subjective value theory, some people manage to do types of work that earns them a whole bunch of money. So they can, if they're addicted to a very expensive lifestyle, they can sustain it and come off as functional addicts, while others with the same addiction, just lesser paycheck, will always come up short and, either resort to crime or rioting in the streets or whatnot. And yeah, I get it. This isn't fair. There's not a lot of things that are fair about the world or about existence or about nature. But it just still, we have to halt and ask ourselves the question, so what are the solutions? Is leveling the outcome, or just tossing countless amount of money at a problem hoping it goes away, is that a tangible, sustainable solution? Is there something that can be done to, and this is, something that some countries have resorted to, can we try and fix people's behavior? And then of course it begs the moral question: is it okay to just go in there and try and dictate that person's behavior because they cannot sustain it, whereas someone who's doing the exact same things because they happen to be able to sustain it financially, we're just going to leave them alone and say it's okay for you to do this, this, and that, and it's not okay for you to do this, this, and that because of this exact reason? Now, I get that. That doesn't sound fair either. And it also sounds harsh that, yeah, well, you have to just be responsible for your own livelihood and whatnot. And, this person is doing considerably better at it, and that person is sucking at it. And then, of course, the question comes in then, of course, how much of a head start did so and so get over that other person? Yeah, all these questions. I get all of these questions. And sometimes because you don't have any help, no head start, you have to strive to create everything for yourself, it can be really, really hard to take those first steps. A lot of people are going to look at me, well, this, white male guy's so fucking privileged, he doesn't know what he's talking about. But you also don't know my life. I'll tell you that. I don't tell this to a lot of people, but I come from the depths of the poverty trap, a single parent household, whole bunch of kids, really way below the poverty line. And it was as a product of misfortunes in my family early on. Which, maybe to detail about later. So yeah, so I know having to work your way up from the beginning and clean the miseries of your childhood. It's tough. I can see why that journey breaks a lot of people. There have been multiple times where that was this close to breaking me. And yet, for some reason, in my 30s, I'm still here. So, at any rate, didn't mean to take this all personal, but I'm sharing stuff with you and trying to give you things that you can then ask yourselves and explore, giving you some concepts and ideas, philosophical and technical principles of economics, also principles of philosophy or consumer behavior, if you will, But yeah, there are all these things. There are plenty of questions to ask. Now, I could give you my answer, and if you look at some of my other videos, you'll probably find my answer. That is also why I'm not going to give you my answer. You don't want my answer? Who knows? Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Your country or any country. But what are the things that you're up against? You take that and you ask yourself. If you want my answer, however, then subscribe, hit the bell icon, look at my other work, stay tuned, and every bit of my stances. But for now, giving this out to you from someone who's spent over 30 years exploring this world, really exploring, really wrestling with things, to you, someone I trust to also be really exploring and wrestling with things. So I want to just give you questions to ask yourself and things to explore. Happy exploring. Now, biking out.